Question: has the state a right to make laws for the sterilization of all convicts? Answer: the state has no such right. This Q&A is based on a papal encyclical, Casti Connubii, by Pope Pius XI, who wrote, "There are some who by public authority wish to prevent from marrying all those whom, even though naturally fit for marriage, they consider, according to the norms and conjectures of their investigations, would through hereditary transmission bring forth defective offspring. And more, they wish to legislate to deprive these of that natural faculty by medical action despite their unwillingness, and this they do with a power over a faculty which it never had and can never legitimately possess. Those who act in this way are at fault in losing sight of the fact that the family is more sacred than the state, and that men are begotten not for the earth and for time, but for heaven and eternity. Public magistrates have no direct power over the bodies of their subjects. Therefore, where no crime has taken place, and there is no cause for grave punishment, they can never directly harm or tamper with the integrity of the body, either for the reasons of eugenics or any other reason." Nowadays, when people talk about forced sterilizations, they usually are talking about the Chinese Communist Party or Nazi Germany. However, before anyone had even heard of Adolf Hitler, many states in the United States had already implemented their own forced sterilization laws. The earliest was Indiana, which enacted its law way back in 1907. The Indiana law allowed for sterilization of criminals, rapists, and what they termed as idiots and imbeciles. By 1935, a total of 27 states had legalized mandatory sterilizations, and by the following year, more than 23,000 forced sterilizations had been performed in the United States. Mandatory sterilization laws were mostly supported by the medical community, and most doctors believed in the science, and they believed that by preventing people with birth defects, they would improve the gene pool. But St. Thomas Aquinas tells us that no one who is guiltless may be punished by a human tribunal, either by flogging to death, or mutilation, or by beating. Those who can't remember the past are doomed to repeat it. The rationale behind forced sterilizations is the exact same rationale that radicals nowadays use for mandatory COVID vaccinations. Then in 1927, the Supreme Court upheld the legality of forced sterilizations in the Buck versus Bell case. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, "It is better off for all the world if, instead of waiting to execute degenerate offspring for crime or to let them starve for their imbecility, society can prevent those who are manifestly unfit from continuing their kind. The principle that sustains compulsory vaccination is broad enough to cover cutting the fallopian tubes. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough." So please note that Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes tells us that the logic that allows forced sterilizations is the same logic that sustains mandatory vaccinations. Of course, this quote from Justice Holmes is reprehensible. But does it come as a surprise that he's a school named after him in Lori Lightfoot's Chicago? And this is the same city that recently removed its statue of a Catholic, Christopher Columbus, because Lori Lightfoot found it objectionable. In 1934, a movie was released called Tomorrow's Children. Because it was perceived as being critical of forced sterilizations, the film was outright banned in New York, Virginia, and Kansas. And it would be fair to make a comparison to current times when Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook banned anyone who even suggested a lab leak theory for the origination of the COVID coronavirus, or suggested that ivermectin might be helpful in treating COVID. So, at least 70,000 people in the United States were forcibly sterilized under the laws promoted by Margaret Sanger and her associates. Interestingly, more women than men were surreptitiously sterilized. In 1932, Margaret Sanger, who as you know is of Planned Parenthood fame, wrote a book called My Way to Peace. In it, she advocated that the state should sterilize those with mental and physical disabilities, including those who she referred to as morons, mental defectives, and epileptics. Her associate, Leon F. Whitney, the director of the American Eugenics Society, shared her opinion and advocated for sterilizing what he termed the lowest fourth of the American population. He said, "We should hardly miss them." One socialist wrote that Catholics who objected to forced sterilization on religious grounds had no right to restrain the freedom of others, and we still hear this nonsense by people who advocate for abortion and birth control. Then in 1933, Adolf Hitler, perhaps impressed with what the United States was doing, set into motion the machinery that would sterilize all unfit Germans regardless of sex. Sterilization was prescribed for anyone whose descendants might inherit any defect, and this was implemented in the light of the most up-to-date scientific knowledge. But after Hitler's Germany was defeated in World War II, the idea of forced sterilizations was too closely associated with him, so it lost its cachet in the liberal circles of America and slowly faded away. Nonetheless, birth control and abortion, the remaining tools in the eugenics handbag, are still with us, and they still plague society. So my question for you is, if there had never been an Adolf Hitler or a World War II, would forced sterilization still be popular in the United States? Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back again within a week with another one. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page and my Twitter page. Every day I post additional content that you won't find on this YouTube channel. And also, please pray for the church.